Hey everybody, Joe and Ashley Kovacs here. You're listening to the THROvacs Podcast. It's where the Kovacs family and our throwing passion collide. All right, podcast number 3. Here we go. First one was just you and I. We just rolled out when you talked to Joe Brown about his training and how different things happened in his life. And now it's back to you and I. We had a lot of great feedback from you guys, so thank you from that. And some more questions are coming in. And I know Ashley kind of formulated some of the ways we're going here in the future. So I'll let you start us off and give us a topic.
Yeah, so our first one was obviously just about you and I and kind of like how we got into the sport. And we had a chance to sit down with Joe Brown. And now I think that the next thing we should discuss is the strength piece of this. Obviously, for you, that's a big deal. It's a big deal for everybody in the throwing community. But I think that people want to hear about kind of like your strength journey. And so I think the first question that I want to ask you is just like, can you talk about your first experiences, the first times in the weight room?
Yeah, it's a good question because people would probably think the opposite. Like I was always a strong guy or in this, and that's what everybody comes up to me now. And it's kind of funny inside because I look back to, I knew nothing about strength or about the weight room. And really my first experiences when I went to high school. And, you know, high school football, you kind of just follow the guys who are older than you and they know everything. And that's exactly what I did. I remember the first time we did like our first football workout, we did these tests. One of them was bench press. One of them was like an overhead and a squat. And like, I got absolute worst. I was the worst on the list. Like, I'm like not talking like offensive guard, defensive lineman. Like I'm talking about quarterbacks, wide receivers. I was the worst.
It's hard to believe, but you've said this before.
I'm sure
it's hard to believe.
High school football coach Dan Kendra, yeah, maybe he still has it written down somewhere because I know this is the thing because I've heard this speech from those coaches about we thought he'd be
just like I can't believe this guy's strong now.
I didn't think they think I was strong then, but I think they were like that's pretty incredibly bad.
Well, like we talked about this before too. I mean, I think that the crazy thing is it's like, all right, you say like I was the weakest guy in the football weight room. And then it's like, I see pictures of you at like 14. And first of all, like, I think it's important. Like, you were young for your class.
Yeah.
So that matters, right? And
I wish my mom redshirted me in kindergarten. I always say that. But, hey. I mean, I was young for my class, and I wish I had a little bit of extra time, too.
Right. So you looked young, and you were young for your class. So, I mean, I think that maybe seeing you before you had, like, any sort of maturity, maybe I can, like, kind of understand that you were not strong at all or – the weakest one in the room. But I mean, like, so how did that shape your journey moving forward?
I think it embarrassed me. And I think that is something that I'm like proud of to say now because like in that embarrassment, it wasn't like this woe is me feeling, but it was just like, that doesn't make sense. Like I need to figure this out. Like there's gotta be a way. And maybe that embarrassment kind of turned into a chip on the shoulder, some kind of motivation. And it was just like, that was something I can control.
Right.
Right. So like, I don't know. At that point, I didn't know what I was doing, but I got a piece of paper and it said to do this many reps. And if you can do more, then you get to do more the next week. Right. So I loved like the kind of the carrot at the end of the rope because I was like, I'm just going to do more. If it says to do 6, I'm going to do 8 and then I could do higher weight. And I loved like the excitement I had every time I went in the weight room to kind of prove to myself, but of course, everybody else who was watching me, that I was going to keep on raising the bar.
Sounds like bigger, faster, stronger, was it?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, 100% every single football weight room in the country. Like, that's what my high school football team did too.
Yeah, it was great.
I just remember like seeing the posters for bigger, faster, stronger.
It was great too because I feel like it gave you a goal.
Yeah, there's definitely a carrot with that program. I never did it because obviously I didn't play football, but like same way as you, like I watched the football players lift and I know that that's what they were doing and it was always like an achievement-based like progression it seemed like, so makes a lot of sense.
Well, I think that's something that even to this stage of my career, obviously I've done a bunch of different weightlifting from football to now training and then obviously you're programming for me now, but like I love still having these little targets or goals. Yeah. I mean, you bring them up for me and we definitely discuss them, but like there's always these things in the back of my mind that get me excited because, our sport can be monotonous, right? So like having these different kind of things like little carrots to dangle in front of me, it's like if we're targeting the bench, we're targeting the trap bar, what'd you do a couple of years ago, right? You show me a video, right? And it's like, all right, well, I'll keep that in the back of my mind. It's kind of that same thing I felt when I was in high school and like, okay, well, that's the guy who I think is the strongest in the gym. well, now I'm the strongest in the gym because I beat him, right? And then you start realizing, well, you could be the strongest in your whole area or your state, in the nation, or the world, right? And I think that's one of the things I liked about strength is because I had to prove it from myself. There was nobody else, no other skill. I mean, you either did the rep or you didn't.
Right. Definitely.
So how about you? How did you start? Because you just said you were around, high school
Well,
football.
I mean, it's different, right? Like, football culture is weight room culture, right? So like every single guy you're going to meet probably got started in the weight room from football.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I'm from North Canton, Ohio, which Canton is the birthplace of football. So obviously football culture is huge.
Hall of Fame.
Hall of Fame. Football culture is huge. So weight room culture is pretty huge as well. I didn't have any business in the weight room at all. I was second in the state my freshman year in the shot, and I didn't lift weights at all. And so going into my sophomore year, I didn't lift at all my sophomore year either. So going into my junior year, the summer of my sophomore year, we went in there and I maxed out. And so my coach went in there with me, my high school throws coach, and he put on 45s. And he's like, all right, we'll just start here and see where it goes, and put the 45s on, 135 on the bench, take it off the rack, and just crushed me, And I think he was super surprised. I think I ended up getting 105 or something, maybe 115. So this was my sophomore year, and I'd thrown 42 feet in the shot with no weight training. And so from that point forward, I was doing a program that my high school coach had brought home that he got at the Ohio Coaches Convention. Well, I found out literally probably 10 years later that the program was from John Smith. Oh. John Smith was the guy that he went, and I actually remember it. I remember him coming back and being like, I got a program. It's from the Ohio State coach. And I was so excited to have a program, so I followed that. And, the thing that I liked about it was that I got better at throwing, and for a girl, a high school girl back then, it was kind of a scary thing to lift weights because no one else was doing it. So I'm the only girl in there. They let me go in there with the football team, which was probably would have been intimidating to 98% of other girls, but I didn't really care. And those guys were pretty nice to me. They were all really nice to me, actually. It wasn't this look at this weird girl in here. It was just they just treated me like one of them, which I don't know if that was a good thing or not, but that's how it went. But it was good because I got to see those guys working hard. I got to see the young kid that did 2 plates on the squat for the first time and everybody cheering for him. It was a really cool first experience for me to see that. But the thing I loved and still really love about the weight room is just the culture building aspect of it, and I think that football does that extremely well. And so moving forward, through college and whatever, when I was done and I started coaching, culture building started for me in the weight room in the fall. So, I've always really respected the weight room. I've always really cared about the weight room. I think that you can teach a lot of great lessons in there. And kind of what you're saying, it's this me versus me type of thing that's very metric. You know what I mean? And I think that that's one of the best things about the weight room is the whole showing the mirror thing. Numbers don't lie, tape measure doesn't lie, the bar and the plates, however much they weigh. And if you did it, you did it. And if you didn't, you didn't. Yeah. And so I think that's something about the weight room that makes it really similar to throwing and also makes it really fun.
When you were in there and you were with, the football teams in the corner cheering, you didn't have that culture because you were the girl in the corner, right?
Right.
And what did you feel about that? I mean, were you able to kind of use some of that energy and bring it onto you? Or do you think, obviously nowadays it's much different with all of the girls lifting at an early age and the exposure from CrossFit has done these things.
Right.
I mean, I know when you were coaching, girls would come to you and they knew how to do a clean and jerk.
Yeah, exactly.
Which, in college, I didn't even know what that was until I graduated.
Right.
What was that like for you then? And then what do you think it'd be like for you now in that same circumstance?
So essentially what happened was it was the last period of the day. It was athletic conditioning. They called it AC. And it was the football team had AC. And somehow they let me do it. They let me have AC. So there's the last period of the day and everybody went across the street to the field house and lifted weights. and they let me go over there. So I had my program and I just kind of stayed out of their way, and like, I think that that's something that I don't know if people would or wouldn't expect that. Like when you were like, when I was a girl around guys doing sports, even from the time that I was like a fourth grader, if you were at recess and the guys let you play basketball with them, like you just kind of go and you don't make a big deal about it and you just like fall in line. So like if they're going to let you play basketball and they're picking teams, you just like wait until they pick you. You like mind your own business kind of. And that's like what I did in there with those guys. Like I didn't make a lot of noise. I watched what they were doing because some of the stuff I didn't know how to do, so like I can remember a guy that ended up playing at Ohio State. His name was Kurt Lukens, and he was a tight end. He was on the track team. He ran like a sub 1000. He had offers from everybody in the country. And I remember like after AC one day asking him, like showing him my sheet and being like, I don't know how to, like, what's a power clean? And like having him explain it to me, you know what I mean? So like, for me, it was like, I got to see that culture of those guys. Those guys were really cool to me. Like they'd tell me what to do. They'd give me some pointers here and there, which was like everything for me because there was no one else to do it. But it made me want that. Mm-hmm. And then when I got to college, and when I was at Ashland for my first semester, seeing women that were strong and having that group and that energy was like awesome. Like I can't explain how formative that was for me as like a female athlete, female lifter. But that really had a big impact on me as a coach, and I think that even like with you and I to this point today, it's like, we like having people around. I think that, you think about that lift you did at UCLA in the rec center this summer, like in May before Prefontaine, I think that you got a little extra boost, a little pep in your step when all those kids were,
I got invited to every frat on the UCLA campus. Did. I was good to go. I could have gone anywhere we wanted to. I could have got you in at that point. We made some good friends. So
long story short on that, and I think we have some footage of it. Joe threw it, LA Grand Prix, had a great meet, 22.92, I think, 22 something high.
Yeah.
And we had Prefontaine like the next weekend, so we did a lift in UCLA's student center.
Rec center, not like the athletic facility, the student rec center.
So Joe got a little bit of, he was tired when we got in there, and then when the kids started seeing him loading the bar, he got a little extra pep in his step and ended up kind of putting on a show in there. So I mean, it was fun. It's fun to have people cheering for you in there, right?
Sometimes you're lifting alone and you're kind of focused in that grind, but then you get some people around you, let alone some people who think 500 pounds is heavy, and you're just like, dude, this isn't even a set. I'm not even gonna count this. Like, it just blows their mind. Yeah. And it's kind of fun. I enjoy those moments because it's fun to be that guy in the weight room.
So I guess the next question for you would be like, what do you think the most important thing to you about lifting is? Like, do you have in your head, like, I always need to have this level? Do you feel like it's like just more of like a checking the box conditioning prep thing for you for throwing? Like, how do you see the weight room fitting into the big picture of your actual profession, which is throwing the shot?
Yeah. I mean, for me, I think there's the reason I, love and rely on the weight room is because it's a measure. Mm-hmm. It's a measure of your standard that, you shouldn't get below this point.
Right.
It's a measure of progress. And I think in what we do, you can only measure where the shot put lands so often, and that it becomes like you need more variables. You need more metrics. And for me, I think, obviously leverage and the height that I am and how I need to throw or how I think I need to throw in this, like, strength does matter. It really helps. And it's not just because of strength of I'm throwing the ball because I'm powerful. I'm building my body and my tendons. I'm building a better version of it every time.
Right.
I kind of view myself as like a Russian doll. And like every time I get in the weight room and I tap in and I get that little bit of squeeze, my body doesn't know what the heck just happened, but it's just like, we need to get better.
Right.
We need to get better.
Right.
So it's just sending repair cells everywhere. And like, we need to be a better version the next day. And for me, that's how simple I think of it. I don't like to overcomplicate it with the, what exact muscles I'm using here and there. Like, I need to know that I took a hit.
Right.
Like, when I take a physical hit and my body is in that strain of like fight or flight, we're going to do it. That means progress to me, because when I come out of that in my entire career, I've always seen a step forward.
Right. So, I mean, like, when you say take a hit, I think you've used that terminology before, like publicly, and people are like, what does that mean? And it's like, obviously what it means is that like you release some chemicals in your body when you did that lift, right?
Yeah.
So like your body is in a stressed state from that exercise. And I think that that's like an important thing to understand about like why we lift the way that we lift. Like certain times of the year, the hormones that you're producing when you do something crazy in the weight room are going to be different than they are when you're doing like a speed lift, right?
Sure, yeah.
So it's like when you say like that squeeze, like that, like, you know, that like you can almost like feel in your body when you're doing that lift. I think that like that is something that maybe young lifters don't think about or understand. But I feel like the first time you do something where you kind of like push through your comfort zone and you feel like kind of like that surge of like adrenaline and like everything that's going on when you're doing that, it like makes more sense as to why that's important. Because like if you never push, that never happens. And I think too, like for us, you know, it's not super flashy the way we lift in terms of like, it's a pretty linear model. It's a pretty traditional model, right? But the thing that I think that makes it extremely effective and that makes it effective all the time is that it just keeps getting harder and harder, right? Like, and that's the thing, like, you know, a good example of it is like, one time somebody said to me, like, I was doing CrossFit and they're like, oh, is CrossFit easy now that you've been doing it for a while? And it's like, no, it's never easy. It's never easier. You just get better, right? So it's like, you could be doing the same workout you did 2 years ago. It doesn't mean it's easier. It means you did more reps with more weight, right?
Well, I mean,
so
you do 5x5 for you, 5x5 for me,
Exactly.
5x5 for the first person in the gym. Like you
Exactly.
can do 5 reps of 5 with a barbell right now, and it's 45 pounds, and that ain't gonna do anything to
Right.
you. But you know, you load it to the point of, you know, am I gonna get it?
Right.
Like for me, when I say the hit, I know the hit's happening before it happens because my mind is telling me no, because it's like you don't want to do it, right?
Right.
You're like, I'd rather go take a nap. I'd rather go do some other things. But it's like that decision to force myself to, not that I think I'm like scared to do it because of injury, right? Because I don't ever take a swing that I don't trust, right?
Right.
But it's that motivation to push through something that you don't want to do because the delayed gratification, all these things,
Exactly.
all these things we talk about.
I mean, and
are
then
big.
that like is a perfect segue into the whole like pay the piper thing, you know? And so that's like a term we use when we're like, you do something that you know you're going to have to pay the price for in terms of like, okay, I'm going to take a hit. I'm going to do 5x5 and I'm going to push it on the squat. Your throwing's going to take a hit for
sure.
a couple weeks, right? And like, how many times have we been there, right? And it's a decision. And I think that's where like the programming comes into play and like why we believe that like the throws coach, whoever's programming should have program for both the weight room and for the throwing because they're so intertwined. Like I can't personally imagine not programming the weight room for people that were throwing for me.
Yeah, I mean, for me, that's like a huge thing. I was always yelled at not to say this, but like I would, you know, if your coach isn't doing your lifting and you're doing your throwing, I mean, they're the exact same thing. You're throwing a weight, you're lifting a weight. There's not a closer correlation in any sport than we get in throwing and lifting. You know, if I load you down on the squat, you're not going to throw far, right? It's like it's a direct correlation, and of course, when you come out of it, it's a correlation.
I mean, and like even for the programming for the throwing, like the amount of reps you're taking at practice, the intensity of the throws you're taking at practice, the ball sets, so meaning the different weighted implements you're throwing, should all correlate with what you did in the weight room.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't, then like you're missing something. That's my opinion on it. And I think that is such a pillar of like everything I believe about training and throwing in the way that it should be, that I just can't imagine not having that. Like obviously, like I had to work pretty hard to maintain control of the weight room at certain institutions that I coached at, you know, and I had to get my CSCS, which I have, and I'm happy to have it. I have the USTCCA, whatever that one is. I had that one too, but then, you know, CSCS kind of like superseded that, which is fine. But like, I mean, there are a lot of throws coaches that are really good, that have had a lot of success, that don't have their CSCS, and they're in their position in terms of programming strength for their throwers at their universities is like literally threatened yearly.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's really indicative of who's in charge at that university, that institution, as to whether they're going to let the throws coach have any say in it. So, I mean, I think that's something that matters a lot, you know?
It does. It matters a whole lot. I mean, to me, that's a decision I make. I mean, that would be a make or break for me
sure.
because I know how important that is for me.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember you fighting for that. That was interesting nights. Passed the test, got through there, and you still had to keep on fighting. But I mean, that's how important it is to you. And
Sure.
that should be something that, should resonate to throws coaches out there, because I'm sure a lot of them are going through the same struggle.
Right.
Right. Because it does matter that much. I don't want to go completely back, but I kind of got a question, right? That kind of was a topic we talked about earlier with culture in the weight room. If I segue into talking about you were the only one girl in your high school weight room, you get to college, you're around girls and guys who are strong now. We are one of the only sports out there that men and women are training in the weight room the same way.
That's a good point.
I think this is something that is very
Great
unique.
point.
Like the culture of football, even like we train sometimes at Capitol, I see those guys in there and they're like the rah is there. The excitement is there. When we get to our combined programs, and now almost every program in the NCAA is combined now, we are now lifting together. Like, what do you think about that? I know some throws coaches in the past would keep the men and women separate in the weight room just to keep that culture. But then obviously now the women have also maybe raised the level. I mean, some of your girls in your weight room sessions, I know they had some of the better culture than the men at the time.
I mean, I think that it's one of those things where sometimes you're going to see females, okay, that are going to come into a weight room, and 17 or 18-year-old women that have never pushed themselves maybe ever before, let alone push themselves around guys.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that there's a certain part of some people that like, you don't want to show every dude in that room you're ugly.
Yeah.
Right. And you have to go there in the weight room. Right. And so I think that it's a really interesting and unique situation. I think the other people that maybe would train together would maybe be like swimmers, but it's a completely different thing, right, than what we're doing in there. I feel like I never felt like the women had a problem being in there with the guys. And I think, like you'd said, sometimes the women were just so good, and I'm thinking back to like being at Western Kentucky with like those girls. I mean, I had a girl in there that front squatted 365 for 3 reps. Yeah. I mean, that was basically probably as good as almost any guy on the football team was doing at that point, right? Sure. So it's like because
when you say that, I think you're thinking from the women's perspective what it's like to be in that weight room. I'm thinking of the guy's perspective,
which is what I mean. You could speak to that better than I can.
But I mean, there's some guys who might get to college.
Well, you should. They're intimidated, right?
They're intimidated. Let's say they obviously, like, we're talking about throwers, but it could be a football kid who's in there, and you're seeing this girl who throws a shot put.
So here's what it's like.
More than you've ever done.
But exactly, here's what it's like. And you've said this before. We've had this conversation. It's the freshman boy.
Yeah.
All right. The freshman boy and the high level decathlete.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. Hey, man. I know you're not going to get beaten disc by this multi.
100%.
Right?
If my buddy Blake listens to this, we gave him crap forever because we were done to the Auburn and there was a high level
50-meter discus thrower,
he like
55-meter discus thrower.
56 meters that day. He was
right?
a 50-meter discus thrower. I was like, you can't
lose
he
to
has
him.
9 other events.
Yeah.
You can't lose to this
guy.
like
he doesn't even train this thing like he's going to beat you. But like there's some really good multis, obviously. But it's the same thing. Like think about it. You're a 17-year-old guy.
Yeah.
Come into the weight room. All right, yeah, we're squatting. You're the strongest dude in your weight room in high school. I think I say this all the time. There is nothing like watching a poor freshman boy go from just blasting that 12-pound shot, first week of practice, pushing on that 16, and it ain't going nowhere. No, that is so deflating, right? So there's nothing more humbling for those poor freshman guys than being like the absolute king of life in high school and then coming into that weight room, right? And seeing a girl do more than you've ever done in your life for a set of 5 on the squat, right? I'm sure that does not feel good, but you see that. Like, I mean, especially if you have a really strong women's group and you have a young guy coming in, like, I'm sure that doesn't feel nice. I tried to be sensitive to that in a sense. Like, you don't want to like the kid to feel humiliated, but then there also is a certain element of like, do you see what they're doing?
Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
And like, you have to understand that like, that's women at a high level. Imagine what the men at a high level are doing. I mean, that's something that you need to understand, right? When you come in there. So I don't know, like, obviously you could speak to that better than I can. I doubt there were any girls in college that were doing anything more than you were doing ever.
No, I don't think there definitely weren't girls that were lifting more than me. I think maybe some javelin throwers on our team might have had that feeling, right? But I think it's also like, I think for the girls, it's the same way. You say, I want to look ugly.
Right.
While the boys are watching. The guys are like, I don't want to be this failure while the girls are watching.
Right.
Because like, that's the thing. I think there's a loss of that football culture where it's just like that rah-rah psycho to a little bit more.
I mean, I can't really attest to the I don't want to look ugly thing because I cared a lot more.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
But I married you.
Thank you.
And you're smarter than anybody I know.
Thank you again. I cared a lot more about being good than I did about looking pretty in the weight room.
But you were kind of an outlier for that mindset. I believe that.
Yeah,
but
I mean, probably so. But I don't know. I just, maybe, but like, I also always felt like this is business. Like I wasn't real. Now, don't get me wrong. Like, did I care about how I looked going to practice or how I looked going to the weight room? Meaning like, there's a certain level of like respect the room, right? Like I would do my hair for a track meet, maybe more than I would to like go to class.
Sure.
All right. And like, so like the thing about that was, and this is something I picked up when I got to college from like the older women that were there, like, especially at Ashland, was like, this is like your reward for all the training, like going to this track meet. So it's like, you want to put your best foot forward. Like, I'm going to take a shower to go to this track meet. You understand what I'm saying? Like, I'm going to like make sure I like look at myself in the mirror maybe a couple extra times before I go here, because like, this is like a high point for me, And so I think that like, I don't know if that's a similar mindset, like that the guys have, but like, taking it back to the weight room, I never was too pressed about anything other than what I was really in there to do from like that standpoint.
Well, I mean, yeah, for sure. We all took showers and combed the hair over.
Did you?
No, I didn't have hair back then. I just said I looked bad. That was a big cue ball.
You shaved your head.
I was short. Yeah.
That's all right.
That was mistakes. We all make them. But yeah, I mean, I think, besides looking good and all that kind of outside stuff there, but I think the morph culture, I mean, even for the throwers, we have the javelin throwers, which are kind of like, you're throwers, but you're kind of the jumpers. You're kind of this mix, right? There's these mix of cultures we get. And of course, the entire track team, if you're dealing with from the distance runners doing their core workouts to the sprinters, the track weight room is a pretty unique experience compared to the football weight room where everybody's kind of just going nuts, regardless of position.
So did you lift with other event areas at Penn State? Yeah, we were just throwers.
No, yeah, we did there.
Yeah.
Now, of course, like we took it over probably in our spaces, but like, we at Penn State, we had a pretty good setup because we had our own weight room right at the track. We didn't have to go share with other sports. Some schools have to do that. So overall it was pretty good, but we still shared with the different event groups and there was never any kind of problem with that.
Sure.
But it's definitely a different dynamic when you go from, I look back to my football weight room moments and like I kind of, will always look at them in like a fond way because that crazy excitement maybe made me better than I even was at that day.
Yeah.
And you kind of lose that as the years go on.
Right.
And you have to find it elsewhere.
I think that for me, obviously football weight room culture played a big effect, but also like, I don't know if you've seen any videos of Judd's stuff with his weight room. And the stuff that he used to do, even like he would be lifting himself, and
I've
it was a
seen videos
scene.
of Judd kicking the chair.
Yeah,
going
exactly.
Nuts.
Kicking the chalk over.
Yeah.
They would like take the plates and whatever the weight was, like everything obviously was steel plates, which was cool, and it was like dungeon vibes, which was cool. And they would take chalk. So say like the squat was like 5 plates for the first time, so it was like 505. They'd write on like the plates like 505 on each side. And it was just like a huge hype session. Like everything about it was just like insane. But I think that was obviously something that like got me excited about lifting and made me feel comfortable to like dig in, And so I think that like fostering that environment where everybody feels like it's cool to go to that dark place when you lift has to be established from the top, right? And then everybody kind of needs to be like of this mindset that like if you're not tapping in, like that's not cool.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. So everything you said here about culture and strength kind of makes me have a question for you, and I think it's probably a broad one in our sports. Why is strength demonized as a bad thing?
I mean, that actually is the question for you. I mean, me, like, again, big influence, Judd Logan, big influence, John Smith, top influences by far. Yeah. Never, ever did I ever hear from Judd, oh, you're too strong. Now, look, if it becomes like you're so strong that your mobility is like tanked, or you're so strong that you like are, I don't know, like the mobility thing is the first thing that comes into play. Like if it's inhibiting your ability to get into positions because you're too muscle bound, then like you got to like cut it off, right? So like it was always for me, like you want to be as big as you can be and jump as high as you can jump, right? So if it becomes a point where like, say you had a 30-inch vertical and then now you've gotten bigger and stronger and your vertical, so obviously there's an index for that, like the power index, right? Mm-hmm. So like you get this number from the power index. Judd would do it like this. It's the same as a force plate now, right? Where it was like the square root of your vertical jump times the square root of your body weight. And it would come up with like a number, like 100 for a guy. Yeah. And he had this scale of like, this is like world class. This is like national level. This is club level, right? And so the thing about it was, I had this happen to me before. I had a kid that lost 50 pounds. He needed to lose some weight. Over the summer, he lost 50 pounds. So his vertical jump weight went way up and his body weight went down and his power index stayed almost the same, but he completely changed his body. Does that make sense? Yeah. So the whole thing was like, all right, well, if you get big, but then your vertical jump suffers so much that now your power index is lower, then that wasn't good weight. Right?
Sure.
So like for me, that's the mentality I always had. Like, and I've always thought that strength was an asset, right? I think that people like to try to say like, oh, you don't need to be that strong, right? But like whenever somebody says something like that, the first thing I think about is when you squatted that 700 for 10 and Judd Logan commented, useful, right? And so, I mean, I think it is useful, you know, especially that like, that's not a common thing to be able to do. And like another person that I really respect is Louis Simmons, having the opportunity to watch him, talk to him, have conversations with him. And like one of his big taglines was like, don't be afraid to make them strong, you know? And I think that the whole like, what's too strong thing is just not something that was ever passed down to me from anybody that I respected in the game. So I never thought that way, you know? But I think that you see people that say that weren't strong people themselves. So like, I think there's some bias there. I mean, like what's your take on the, oh, you're too strong or you don't need to be that strong or.
Yeah. I mean, strength is a strength to me,
right? For sure.
That's one thing I believe. I think, you know, people who say you don't need to be that strong to throw that far. I might agree with parts of that, but to have the longevity in this career and be able to keep on doing it at a level that you could demand when you're not on your best day, that to me is what strength is. Like it's about raising your minimum. It's about getting there. Like everybody can chase this mythical throw that they can catch. And I believe everybody's seen that in the sport, but you know, I view what I do at a professional level of I need to have these standards that I get paid. You know, our sport, you know, it drops off exponentially quick. And I've been doing this. This is going to year 13 for me. And I've been successful to be able to make this a career full time because my strength.
I just 100%. Think that that's like something that when you have that in your back pocket, it's an asset. Like I remember in college saying to my coach, like, I need to be strong enough that I can be having a bad day technically and still throw 17 meters. Like that was something that like even back then I thought about. And I do think that like sometimes this whole throwing thing gets to be so like cutesy with all the technique and all the fluff of it's like at the end of the day, if you don't have a motor or an engine that can get you to a certain point, like having to always rely on your body feeling awesome to be able to like technique a throw, I think that that's just like not the way that my mind worked as a coach. My mind kind of worked in the sense of like, if I have a girl that has a stand throw that's 16 meters, she's probably always going to be good for like 1750.
Sure.
Right? A glider or whatever, and so for me, like that helps raise your minimums. Like that's like your thing, raise your minimums. And I think that like the stronger you get, the better your engine is, the higher your minimums are. And I think like one of the things that you say all the time that I think is awesome, you're like, what's the difference between a 60-footer, a 70-footer, 75-foot throw? What's the difference?
It's time.
And you're like, time and squeeze. So you're like holding positions longer, right? And the stronger you are, it's like a great example, right? It's a great example of that is like when we go to these camps and you're teaching a kid how to get in a position and their legs are quivering because they have no VMO development and they can't hold single support. So they just can't do it. Like that's a position that you've been in for hours and hours and hours and hours over the duration of your career, but your body's strong enough to handle that. So I think that like all of that stuff, people need to understand. It's not just about like, oh, Joe has a big bench press. Oh, Joe has a big squat. Like that is such a low level thought of your level of strength.
I mean, strength is a strength. I think one of these things in our sport, and I think maybe we're unique because of it, but there's a lot of guys, particularly the guys more than the women, who I don't want to sound bad saying it, but they like didn't cut it in football to maybe the mindset you needed there. So maybe to me, it's a little bit more of like a beta mindset, softer. So you want to like technique and hack your way to what makes it happen rather than just digging deep and finding a way. And that's kind of what, pisses me off in our sport a little bit is because you have these mentalities of, I don't need to be strong to throw far because you're trying to find an outlier that you're not. Most of the people who say those statements are not outliers, right? And I think...
Do you think you're an outlier?
I think I can do some outlier things. I think
you're definitely an outlier.
I think
because
I'm really
if anybody watches this, they're going to say you can't say that because you are 100% an outlier.
To me, I won't deny that, right? I'm an outlier for sure because my strength and mobility. I think my mobility, my tendon strength is very high. I think that's something that I rely on more so than my muscular strength. And for me, the way I view my why is Joe's bench so high? It's not like I'm like, oh, if I bench press this, I'm going to throw this much farther. My bench is high because it's higher than it was yesterday. That's how I like my body is better than it was last year. And then next year, it'll be better next year. If it's not, that means I did something wrong. So it's like, it's the only thing I can measure outside of where the ball lands when I'm throwing. And I need something to see progress. And if I don't see that progress, then how do I know I'm getting better? How do I know I'm not taking it easier? And it's not all about strength. Sometimes we work on some other things that we measure, no doubt. But like the strength component, I mean, mass moves mass, right? And we are creating force. And for me, it's like, a lot of guys want to talk about it's all these different things about technique. And I agree, they're all right. But if you overlook the body, what are we talking about? Because I always say you can put a decathlete in the best biomechanical positions instantly. Right. But they may not have the engine to make it go.
I mean, and that's like an example that I used a lot. It was like, if we're the exact same height, we're the exact same weight, we have the exact same level of athleticism, we're in the exact same positions, and I'm way stronger than you, I'm going to throw farther than you do. And I fully believe that. Yeah.
I mean, to me, it's like the guys who tell themselves it's about the motion of the ocean. Just be an aircraft carrier, make your own waves. That's what I think. I know it sounds bad saying it, but find a way that you make a change rather than being, trying to just see what's out there.
I just think that it can get very, in the weight room, it's like that, the whole you versus you versus the weight. It's very binary, and I think that that's something I think you and I kind of agree on that mentality for everything of it's very black and white. It's can or cannot. You did it or you didn't. There's no middle, and I think that there's just not a whole lot of room for arbitrary ideas in the weight room. It's just it's pretty cut and dry, and I think that kind of bothers some people. You know what I mean? Because I think people like having excuses for why they didn't do this or why they didn't do that. And in the weight room, it's very it's just very numerical. It's statistical, and so I think that's part of the reason that I love it. It's kind of the same reason I love track. And Louis Simmons was a huge track guy. He loved track and field. He loved the throws. And I remember one time I specifically asked him, why do you like track? And he's like, numbers.
Yeah.
He said numbers. He said
loved
numbers. He
data.
loved the data. He's like, I could get anybody to run faster.
Yeah.
And he believed that. And like, there were high level track people that consulted Louis all the time.
Sure.
Because he could like figure out a hack somehow with like the numbers of like, do this, do that, do this. And, you know, it made a lot of sense. So I think that it's just one of those things where you either love the weight room and you think that it's like a humongous asset, or it's something that maybe you're like intimidated by and you never really bought into. And I think you can definitely tell the people that like rely on it in this sport and the people that don't.
Yeah, I think you see it, especially not just, you know, obviously you see it in the throws, but I think I've seen it, you know, being at the Olympic Training Center and the jumps and some of the sprinters out there. There is just such a benefit. And I think this blanket statement of like the negativity about it is honestly a bunch of people who don't know how to use it right.
Right.
Anybody who doesn't think it's helpful, it's because you're not smart enough to use it as a tool to help you. You're using it as a tool to hurt you. So, and
well, I mean, that's a whole nother part of it too. I think that like some people see what you're doing and they're like, oh my gosh, like that's so stupid. Like, how could you, that's such a risky thing to do. And it's like, if you had like any idea how calculated this stuff is.
I think one thing I should say too, while we have, you know, people who listen, is like, I never really lift and I'm taking a swing that's like a chance.
I know.
There's a couple times that, you know, when we do have a triple spot or over COVID and you're just spotting me, and maybe that's different. But there's a couple times that we purposely are taking a little bit of a swing, but like 99% of the time, I wouldn't say I'm training easily, but like we
I've never seen
I've never
you
gotten hurt in the weight room.
Right, and I've never seen you except for the time you dropped a plate on your foot.
They were very slippery new plates, but they look gorgeous.
It's a whole other conversation, but I mean, I've never seen you pick the wrong weight, make a ego decision of I'm going to go up 100 and some pounds when I really only should have gone up, 40 or whatever. And I think that that's also something that people need to understand. Like, you have to respect the weight room, right? And you have to respect positions. And if you're not in a position to load weight, that is a huge problem if you are, like, especially for like young lifters. And I think that people think we're just in here just like crushing weight all the time. Like, when I have a college weight room that I'm programming for, we do not touch a barbell and load it for the first 10 weeks because we're doing all this general prep stuff. Okay. And like anybody that's ever been in my weight room can attest to that. Now, would we do some bench press stuff here and there? Like, maybe so, but the nucleus of what we're doing for the first 6 weeks at least is general prep. And we're doing things that are like kettlebells and battle ropes and pushes and med balls and all this different stuff that's preparing our small muscles to handle what we're about to do with our big muscles, right? And that's how we don't get hurt, how we don't become stale from the weight room, right? But like, if they can't load in a position that makes me feel comfortable, you're not loading. Yeah. You're just not. So when I see these kids lifting and it looks crazy, like your knees are all twisted, your spine's all S-shaped, like that cannot happen. No. That's not safe. And like, you aren't going to get strong in bad positions. You're just not. All you're going to do is hurt yourself. And then you're going to hate the weight room. Yeah, for sure.
No, I think it's something good to be said. I think it's one of those things like, that's one of the reasons I've never really posted any of my stuff. And there's a bunch of reasons why. And, but like, I don't want somebody to think, okay, Joe just squatted 750 pounds. So I'm going to go squat 750 pounds. Now I'm going to throw 23 meters. You're going to get hurt doing that, right? The amount of like reps and due diligence of like body work, right? In terms of like, my core, my column. I mean, I go against any one of those guys at the strongman comp right now.
For sure.
How strong this is. And I'm sure we're all similar enough that we can have a battle. But like, I know how to make my core a column that's so strong and so tight, and there's so much internal pressure in it that my spine is protected.
Exactly.
I know how to turn my body into a Coke can. And because of that, when I take these heavier lifts, it's not on my body that's doing the strain. My legs are doing the work. And so many people, their body's doing all the work to do the stabilizing.
Well, that's a good segue into like this topic that like, I think we just went over this at a camp. Like, if you are lifting and you're squatting and the next day you come and your back is completely just rocked from a back squat. Now, am I saying that your back is not involved in your back squat? Absolutely not. It absolutely is engaged during a back squat. But like if the thing on your body that's the most aggravated or sore after a back squat is your lower back, I guarantee you, without even ever seeing your lift, I guarantee you were in a less than optimal position. Yeah, guarantee you your chest was forward. Exactly. Column, yep. So like that's the thing. Like if you have a back squat on your program and your legs are not feeling the ramifications of that exercise, you're not lifting right. And then the program's wrong. Yeah. Right. And so it's like that is like, to me, like red flag, can't go on, need to fix it. And then you can't load, right? So unless there's green lights with it, like not green lights, like, okay, the squat was deep enough, but green lights meaning like, okay, you're in a good position. There's some structural alignment there. Like your spine is erect. Like your like posture is good. You know how to like breathe out, breathe into the belt. Like you're sitting back properly. Like all these things have to check the box before I'm feeling comfortable loading your back, right?
Oh, and it makes a ton of sense because this is why the weight room to us is so correlated to the ring, because these same things about check the box or maybe gymnastics scoring mentality that my position was so good that I check the box here, not just the result, is the same thing we talk about inside the ring. You know, my alignment is what I want in the ring. You know, obviously we can measure where the ball goes, and that could just be, you know, you're fresher that day or you had a good night's sleep, but are we able to replicate it the next day? And are we building the base of the pyramid from a system?
Exactly.
And that's one thing we talk about all the time is a system. We have a system for our strength. It's directly correlated to the system inside the weight room.
Right.
There's a rhyme or reason to doing everything.
100%.
And I would love to debate with people who are at a high level of their own rhyme or reason.
Right.
But
that's the thing. I think everybody that is at a high level has a system.
Sure.
And that's one of my things, like with some of the college coaches, like when these kids visit other schools, like in your recruiting and you just like want to know, like you talk to a kid that goes to like these schools and you're like, okay, that kid knows what's up because every single coach that they're going to, I know that coach has a system. Yeah. Right. Sure. And there's some that don't. And there's some that are just trying to like piece things together as they go. And then there's some people that you're like, I know they have a system. I know they have a system. I know they have a system. And they're producing like results consistently based on that. Right. So I think that all that stuff makes a humongous difference, you know, and I also just think that like one of the reasons that you are as strong as you are is because you are a good lifter. What does it mean that you're a good lifter? Well, it doesn't just mean that you're strong. It means that you're a good lifter in the sense that you lift properly. Your mechanics for all of your lifts are really good. Yeah. Like anybody would say that. And you've spent some time on them. You've worked on your technique before, right? But like you are in solid positions to load all the time. I've rarely, like there have been a few times where I feel like there's been some spells where you've gotten kind of like out of alignment a little bit on your squat, the slot, or whatever. The rack isn't what like all those types of things.
Close grip squat, and I need that wide grip.
Right. And so, I mean, that could be a thing on a rig, right? Like if you don't have the rig that you like, and that's the thing. That's why when we go abroad and we're getting ready for, okay, a perfect example that I think of is when we're in Budapest and we go all around the city of Budapest to try to find the Rogue combo rack because you're like, that's a rack that I trust. I've used that rack. I know that rack's sturdy, whatever. Like, and we're not just saying that because you're a Rogue athlete. Like legitimately, before you're even a Rogue athlete, you would seek out a rig like that because it's, you know, it's safe, you know, and like, that's another thing. Like you're never going to go to a weight room that you don't trust. The equipment, the safety is just like a humongous point.
Well, even back to the beginning when you talked about when we went to the UCLA weight room, I saw a Rogue power bar and a Rogue track bar. So, I mean, the weights that were on it, it didn't matter. They were just hanging on there as being heavy. But the bar itself, I needed to trust that. And that's important for me as the stronger you get, the more fine-tuned you get in your movements and the more you have to trust your equipment. And obviously, we have the equipment we trust.
Yeah, I mean, for sure.
There's a reason for that.
I think that the strength conversation could go on for like 10 hours. You know, I know everybody wants to know more about programming. I know everybody wants to know more about like the technical things that you think about or positioning that you know, that runs through your head when you're about to set up for a lift. The last thing I'll ask you, because I think this is just like a cool question, but like when you have weight on the bar that like is a weight that you know you have to take with like an amount of respect, what is going through your head before you set up under the bar? Like, is it a technical checklist? Is it like we're going to the darkness? Like you kind of have something in your head that's like making you, like triggered? Like where do you go before you get under the bar?
I think when I'm younger in my career, I think everybody tries to find like, the Disturbed song of like,
Sure.
Going into that zone, right? For whatever reason, as I got older in my career, that doesn't work anymore. And we have kids. Like I have no more anger in my head. But what I do have and what I've had my whole career is I am like the anxiety of focus I have for squeezing my muscle position. I am never scared about not standing up in a squat. I'm never scared about not being able to push the bench up off my chest. Those things are never in my head. What's in my head is squeezing my back and keeping that tension and keeping my chest where I am. Squeezing my back that when the bar is on my back, it's welded to my spine, right? That my everything is so tight and secure that I feel one with the bar, feel one with the movement, that like I'm thinking about that, because if those things are all together and I have that welded feeling where it's all one, like then the exercise is just that. It's just the exercise. It's just executing. Oh, I'm just like squatting down and standing up, right? But all those external factors, any little wiggle on the bar, any little wiggle on the back, positioning front and back, that is what makes the exercise hard.
Right.
So if I can set it and forget it in the right position, and I'll use that same analogy outside in the ring, if those things in my head are locked in, then I'm like willing to accept the load or the set, like the squeeze, because I mean, there's definitely a discomfort of like, it doesn't hurt you, right? But you're like under pressure,
right?
You're under pressure. And I would never, ever dream about doing that without having the internal checking the box and having all the tension and pressure lines where I need to be.
Yeah. I mean, I think that like sometimes I see people do stuff in the weight room, like a video, and it's so like literal cringe for me, because I'm like, you're like 2 more times doing that before you blow something out.
It's like Instagram. I don't watch that shit.
It's like even when you see something that's like you did it, like somebody did it, but it looks so volatile that it's just like, it's like, no, and that's obvious. It's not everybody, but like you will see that, especially like younger people, like that are just like, and I think that there's like that fine line between like, you want to go, rev. Right. And like, I've had guys like that in my career before that were like, they wanted to push, but it's like, dude, if you want me to let you push, you got to get your technique going. Like you got to get in better positions, because like, I know you think you're strong enough to do this, but you're not strong enough to do it in the right way. Therefore you're not going up, and I think that that's something that like treating the weight room, like you have to have discipline about your movements to be able to like deserve to be able to go up in a sense. And I'm just like, it's just obviously like that's never a thing with you, because like you're such a seasoned lifter. But I think too, like with that being said, there were so many times in the weight room where we had guys that were going to bench 500 pounds or something like that for the first time, or load the bar more than they ever have before. And I think that there's just like something about like the fact that you know what it's like to bench whatever, that like when these guys would put 500 pounds on the bar for the first time, it's like Joe knows how that feels when it hits the bottom on your chest, and I don't. You know what I'm saying? So like as the strength coach in the weight room, it's like, well, Joe's going to tell you what it's like to hit the bottom on this bench that you have 500 pounds on, because he understands like how the weight's going to kind of sit in and go. Like there's something about been there, done that with these heavy weights that I think only the people that have been there, done that can actually speak to.
Yeah, I think it's been there, done that as well. I mean, we just had the Arnold this past weekend, and I'm sitting at a table with Hafthor Bjornsson and Ray Williams and talking about lifts that like, you can't have a conversation with unless you've had over 900 pounds on the bar, because the bar wiggles different than 900 pounds. No matter how good your bar is, it's going to act different when you get over a certain threshold. So you can only have that conversation with so many people in the world.
Sure.
Like, and when you have that conversation, instantly the other person knows about it, because you go through this feeling or this, I know when this happened, so I adjusted this way. So like having those conversations is really fun for me, because, we were at a table with maybe 4 or 5 guys. There's probably maybe 4 or 5 other guys out there that can really kind of chime in that way.
Right.
Especially in that part of our training. To me, the weight room, the mindset of like how you said, like putting those little things together, putting that the system behind that is really what I would like want young lifters who are listening to this, young throwers who are listening to this, and realize like the surface level is the result you did, right? Those are just the weeds. But like if you can really dig deep in the roots and you like view your foundation as a long-term thing, and that's what we talk about, like especially when you were in college, it's just like we'd much rather see somebody get full depth, go all the way down,
right.
have control of the bar,
exactly.
come back the next week and keep on swinging. Then I saw somebody do something on YouTube and I'm going to attempt it and I'm going to hurt my back.
Right.
Like it's just nonsense, but unfortunately we see a lot of that out there.
Right. I mean, and I think like for me, when you're talking about that, something that I learned young that I think is huge. And if there's like one thing from this podcast that like a young lifter can take away, identifying your functional weaknesses and attacking those. So this was something that Judd Logan talked to me about for the first time. Judd had been influenced by Paula Quinn, who was, obviously functional weakness. And then even like the conjugate system with Louis, it's essentially like finding out where you're weak and getting stronger. And then like the whole system gets stronger, right? Yeah. So for me as a strength coach and programming for throwers, it's like, it's hard for me to write a program for somebody that I haven't done like a needs analysis on, right? Yeah. Because I don't know what their functional weaknesses are. I haven't seen enough of them yet to do that. Now, like you can write a program and it can be effective, but like I'm most effective when I can see the lift and I know where the lift's falling apart. So, to speak to what we did with young athletes or when we're in the college system, it's like, all right, well, let's see, go do your bench. All right, you failed at the top. We need to do some tricep stuff. We need to do these exercises. They're going to help your functional weakness of your bench. When I learned that that's how you actually get stronger, by strengthening your weaknesses, I mean, and this isn't just, obviously, like, this is one of those things where it's a weight room thing, but it's like a life thing. Like, find out where you're weak and get strong. Like, and don't hide from that. Like, where are you weak? Be honest about it. Look it dead in the eye. Correct it. And then you're going to get stronger. It's the same thing with anything and everything in life, right? So I think that's, like, a really awesome thing that applied so directly in the weight room for every single thing that you need to get stronger. And it also taught me, like, as a person, where are you weak? That's how you get stronger. So identifying weaknesses is strength.
That's a great quote to wrap it up on.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to do it right here, but
thanks.
I think we'll replay that a few times because that was a pretty good one, because that is definitely something I think all of our listeners can take something back for. They're a thrower, they're a lifter, something in life. That is something that, goes past just the ring, goes past just the weight room. Take it in everything you do in life. We're really excited that you guys listened today. We're excited for more questions. If you want to, comment on this on Instagram, give some questions. All right, guys. Thank you guys for listening. This was an exciting podcast for us to do because obviously strength is such an important thing to Ashley and I. We're super excited to bring you guys more content. Whether you guys are listening right now and wrapping up your indoor season or just starting your outdoor, take all this information, put it all together, and find a way to go out your outdoor season and put together a new PR.